Internets, I already told you, but if you didn't know, the Premium Pete Show 5-City Live Tour presented by WeWork is going down. Next week in Atlanta, our first stop, October 5th, 7 to 11 p.m., okay? If you live in Atlanta, be there. RSVP link in my bio. If you don't live in Atlanta, tell someone that lives in Atlanta the Premium Pete Show Live is going down. I'm telling you right now, sounds by DJ Wally Sparks. We're going to have free food, giveaways, man, drinks, man, great conversation, special guest, sponsored by Grillo's Pickles, Jason Martin, College of Hip Hop. You ain't know, who the fuck knows who's going to show up? But it's going to be a special one. And I already told you, we're going to hit cities like Philadelphia, L.A., Toronto, and Houston. I can't wait. Check the fuck in. Let me know where you want to see us at. If you're from a city, if you're from fucking cities. I know Seattle was telling me, yo, why didn't you come? Seattle, maybe 2018. Don't worry about it. Okay? But next week, October 5th, Atlanta, it's on you. Come and hang out with the kid. Now, let me tell you something. This episode that we have today, I wanted to do something for people who want to start a podcast, who are podcasting, who want to understand how to make money off their podcast, who want to understand where the future of podcasting is. So that's what this episode is called, The Future of Podcasting with Chris Morrow, a guy who risks his job to start a network that is now respected and has become a machine that produces some of the best podcasts in the world. Internet, I present to you The Future of Podcasting episode with my friend, Mr. Chris Morrow. Burr.
Come on, everybody get set, let's go. It's the next episode. It's the Premium Pete Show. News, interviews, all of the info. Listen up, it's the Premium Pete Show. If you want the scoop in the low, down low, listen to the show, cause Milk said so. Fuck what you heard, better act like you know. It's the Premium Pete
Internet,
Show.
welcome back to another episode of the Premium Pete Show. Sitting here with a return guest, okay? It's a little more calmer this time, but not only, do you call yourself the Podfather anymore or no? Well, not you, but people. Are they still calling you?
Yeah, people still call me that. I don't
use
use
it
myself.
Do you have a new name?
If you give me one.
Okay. Well, we'll give you one.
You can't pick your own nickname.
That's true. Actually, you know what? Sometimes you can, because if you pick it at a young age and you run with it, it just trickles over and people remember who the fuck you are.
Yeah, mid-40s is...
Yeah, that's a little hard.
Yeah.
A little hard. But listen, I was thinking to myself, I said, I want to have Chris back, but I wanted to go over, I wanted to make it not only the business, but the future of podcasting.
Right.
And I was like, who better to talk to than someone who, risked a lot to get where he is today. But unfortunately, what people don't understand, it's still a lot more work.
Yeah.
So we'll get to it. But anyway, listen, ladies and gentlemen, Chris Morrow's in the building.
What's up?
Right off the bat, podcasting is all around now.
Yep.
Okay? It's literally saturated. Could you say that with podcasting?
I'd say a certain type of podcast is saturated, yeah.
But it's to a point where everyone's doing one. Isn't that like the new trend that happens? Meaning maybe certain people are doing this, like a tiny room chat, or they're doing a YouTube, or Google Play video. Now it's like podcasting. You don't think that it's gotten to be a trendy thing?
Oh, it's definitely trendy, and it definitely feels like everyone's doing one. And I have trouble keeping up with it.
Sure.
It feels like a lot, but I think there's still room out there for people to. I just think it's harder now.
Yeah.
When
you say it's harder, what do you mean by that?
Well, I think it's harder if you are on the outside looking in and you're saying, I want to start a podcast. There seems to be a lot of action in this space. There seems to be a lot going on. Maybe I can make money. Maybe I can whatever your reason is.
Sure.
We were lucky when we first started. There just weren't as many people in the space. And there were even less people doing the type of shows we did, creating the type of content that we did. So, and the bar, the thing with podcasting, why I think it was sort of inevitable that it was going to get to this point is the bar for entry is very low. And by that, I mean, it doesn't physically take much to create a podcast, right? Mm-hmm. Me and you could say, hey, let's make this movie. We got an idea. Okay, we could write the script. We still got to sell the script.
Sure.
It's changed a lot. It's a lot easier to physically make a movie than it was 20 years ago with digital and the cameras. But, you still got to get a little bit of a crew together. You still got to get, for us to start a podcast, what did it take? Nothing.
Sure.
Now we were with loudspeakers when it started. We were fortunate in that we also had access to some good studios, but we could have done it.
Some of the most amazing studios. For people who didn't hear Chris Morrow before, we did an episode a long time ago in the early days of the Premium Pete Show, which is probably 6 months ago.
I know exactly when it was because it's when I first started getting sick, November.
Really?
Yeah.
So did we put the Maloiki on you?
Nah, I was already into it. I remember the night specifically.
When you say sick, what do you mean?
I have Lyme's disease.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Is everything okay?
Yeah, I mean, it's a battle. I'm not going to lie. I don't know how many people out there know about Lyme's, but you get it generally from being bit by a tick, which is probably what happened to me. I probably got bit like 6 years ago, and it first started kind of getting symptoms in August of last year. And then the reason I specifically remember that episode, other than that it was a great episode, obviously, was I was like at an event. Remember I had a little suit on?
Sure, that's right.
I was at an event and I wasn't drinking because I was trying to watch myself, and I was talking to people. It was like a gala, and all of a sudden, like, I started kind of like swaying a little bit, and I was like, man, I had too much to drink. And then I was like, fuck, I didn't drink anything. And that's the night where it sort of started kicking in. I was like, oh damn, I'm having like neurological shit from it. So
are you on medicine or treatment?
Yeah, I mean, the thing with Lyme's is, I won't make this all about Lyme disease, but it's like a gray area. Like, I'm at the point now where like the doctors don't really know what's going on, and they're telling me they don't know what's going on. And that's kind of like a scary place to be, because I think most of us grow up thinking like, all right, you get sick, you go to the doctor figures out what it is, he gives you the medicine, you take it, maybe it takes a week, maybe it takes a month, but eventually, I mean, obviously things like cancer, that's not the case, but like for most sicknesses, and like they just can't quite wrap their heads around it. So, but I'm here, I'm working, I'm living my life, I'm just tired a lot, which is why it's 7:30 and I'm drinking a coffee right now.
Hey, listen, I'm going to keep you in my prayers, for sure.
I appreciate it.
Keep you in my prayers. For those that don't know Chris Morrow is co-founder of Loudspeakers Network. Also has been in radio, broadcasting, writing books, bunch of shit, okay?
Yep.
And a long-lost friend, and sometimes, maybe a long-lost argue enemy. But, it's funny how when we did the episode before, it's like it turned out to be better than we thought. Like, it's funny, people who listen were like, that was a lot of tension.
I mean, in retrospect, I was also out of my mind. I'm realizing now with the Lyme's, it was like really starting to kick in.
Yeah.
But yeah, to the listeners, there's no doubt I left the studio pissed off. And I was like, but I think I told you this. I remember saying, you know what, before I fucking go crazy, let me go back and listen to it the next day. And if I'm overreacting,
yeah, sure,
I'll tell you. And I was like, you know what, I was overreacting. There's
no, it was
crazy.
good. It was good, and it was pure, and it was organic. Yeah. And, one thing I liked about it that people got out of it, that you really risked your livelihood,
right,
to help create, what we were doing.
Yeah.
And then formally, make the Loudspeakers Network. And I think that some people may have not known that. And on that episode, that's why one thing I really like is people were showing how much love, and what it really took. I remember somebody hitting me, I don't know if it was through email or tweet or text, I'm not sure, and somebody saying like, damn, man, Chris, like I know what it takes now, but it's a lot, Yeah,
I mean, and, I'm not trying to say I did anything extraordinary. I mean, we're all risking something,
sure,
right, at the end of the day. Like, anytime you take your time and keep applying it week after week to something, that is a risk unto itself, because that's something else that you could be doing. You're betting on yourself. The situation with the studios, it was just like that, kind of heightened, because there was always this kind of thing over my head where like, we're going to get caught, we're going to get found out, like I'm going to get fired, all that sort of stuff. So it was like a little bit more intense for me, but I'm not going to lie, I had a great time. Like those days were like a lot of fun.
And you were trying to make sure that there wasn't 1,000 people up there when
Yeah.
you were letting us tape the Combat Jack show
Yeah.
when we had no studio back in 2013 or 2012 or something like that.
Yeah.
And I remember Nori came up there with like 30
Nori was
people.
the worst.
You know, like people were loud, and literally we were in an office building where some very important people. Can we mention anybody's name?
I prefer not to.
Okay, no problem.
Yeah.
And that would that studio that we were taping at, and you know, it's funny. I said this before, but I'll say it again. When we went, so for those that don't know, the Combat Jack show started at PNC Radio. When we left PNC Radio because they were doing some renovation, I give credit to Combat a lot. And I give credit to Chris too, but I give because he could have said, "All right, we'll wait till you guys renovate." Chris hit him up. You know, that's how amazing the internet is. Hit him up, told me he was a fan, and had a studio for us. We directly went over to that studio, and I'll tell you, that was the crispiest I ever heard my voice sound.
Right.
I was like, "Wow, this is some serious shit now." And we did some amazing work over there, man. You know, amazing episodes. You know what? You know what I want to tell you? For people who may not hear this. What are some of the podcasts that you listen to?
Me personally, I'm in a weird thing now that like I've been kind of sick. I've been like just focusing on stuff that like is light. So I listen to a lot of basketball podcasts right now.
Really?
Yeah, I'm into like Zach Lowe has a basketball podcast on ESPN.
Mm-hmm.
And then I listen to a lot of scripted stuff. I listen to Crime Town, which is one of Gimlet's
I love
shows.
Crime Town.
Crime Town's dope, right?
Yo, I love it. Yo, you ever heard of Ear Hustle?
You know, I've been meaning. You know, there are also like a bunch of podcasts that kind of fall into the category where there's stuff I feel like I should have done them myself.
Yeah.
And I feel like Ear Hustle, I'm like,
bro, I love Ear.
I should have done this shit. Radiotopia, right?
Yeah, but Ear Hustle is taped out of San Quentin Prison.
Right.
It's co-hosted by an inmate. And I'm telling you, I'm not just saying this because I've been away and because I know what it is, but man, they have like an episode about the shoe, like just explaining different people who've been in the box and what it was like.
Yeah.
You know, I really think it's amazing. And the dopest thing about it is at the end, because I still think this podcast shit is still untapped.
Yeah.
Even though I just said it was saturated a couple of minutes ago, it's still untapped because at the end you hear, "This is Warden Johnson, and I approve this message." And I was like, how the fuck did they get a warden to say you could do a podcast in a prison? Think about it. You just said we could do a podcast at home.
Yeah, but I think that's the thing, right? Is it saturated? When we first started doing our shit, it was just turn on the mic, start talking your shit, and that's the podcast. And a lot of people have rushed in that space. Some people have done, you know, an incredible job making podcasts like that. But moving forward, I think they're really kind of, I won't say revolutionary, but the stuff that really is going to move the needle is the higher concepts, the more scripted shows, something like Ear Hustle, something like, you know, Crime Town, Mogul, which we did with Gimlet. And, you know, having just come out of the first season of Mogul, the thing that I won't say troubles me, but it takes a lot of work to do a show like that. It takes a lot of money to do a show like that. It takes a lot of really smart people. And what allowed us, when we started with Combat Jack Show, let's say, to just turn on the mics and go, you got to have an operation behind you. You got to have resources.
You're saying it becomes a business.
Well, it's always a business, right? People want to get paid. But
Sure.
Loudspeakers was a mom and pop
Sure.
right?
Okay.
We just like, hey, let's start this shit. And you know, I go to these conferences and meetings, and I look around the table, and I'm sitting next to the guy from ESPN, and I'm sitting next to the guy from iHeart, and this, you know, the big boys are in the space now, and they're not going anywhere. So I think the challenge is, how do you keep making these authentic grassroots shows in your mom and pop store when Amazon's down the street now and Target's down the street? Because those are the brands that are in the space now.
But even though you're considered mom and pop, and I totally understand when you say that, but you're also someone who has made some waves. Do big companies look at like, hey, this guy knows what he's doing, we should work with him?
Yeah, I mean, I think Gimlet was an example of that. But
did you come to them? Like, how did that?
No, they reached out to Reggie.
Okay,
they were fans of the Combat Jack Show, and they reached out to Reggie, and you know, that was a great look, and it was a great learning experience to kind of get in there and see how you put together a show like that, or a show like Crime Town. You know, we worked with a lot of same people who worked on the Crime Town show. but you gotta, I'm talking years, and I mean, it was like making a movie. I mean, we would have meetings where we do 10 versions of one script, 12 minutes of dialogue.
Now that you're creating something like that new, like Mogul,
yeah.
Do you focus on money, or do you focus on trying to get something done that you never did before? Because you guys do podcasts, we do podcasts, we could explain to them, but the way you're telling me is like, there's so much more than that involved. Like, these guys helped out.
You mean
also.
When I'm looking at a potential podcast to get involved with, am I looking at something that would make money, or am I looking at something that I just want to do?
I'm talking about the Mogul, like in the sense of like, meaning like you basically and Reggie went into uncharted territories, something that you'd never really done before, but podcasting.
Right.
Created Mogul. It's awesome.
Yeah, thank you.
I loved it, and I felt that I feel like it's going to open up doors for so many people.
Yeah.
But right off the bat, people want to get paid. I'm not asking how much you got paid. I'm saying, but without even knowing what that could be, how do you grab a certain dollar for that? Like, say, hey, we need to get paid this, because you don't know. Like, if you negotiated before it and then after, would you probably say, you know what I mean?
Well, I think they're expensive enough that the goal with something like that is to break even, basically, and make a little bit of money. I think, and this isn't just Mogul, I think this is across the board, and you're starting to see it, where the real money is going to be in podcasting is in IP, intellectual property, which is these shows getting spun off into TV, movies, thing of that nature. And the podcast is going to be what's the appetite for the movie studio, for the TV network, whatever the case may be. And then that's when you'll start to see, like, quote unquote, the real money coming in.
So maybe the podcast is like the door of the house, and then you go inside and there's all other rooms.
Yeah, I mean, look, a podcast is content, right?
Sure.
And at the end of the day, whether it's Hollywood, whether it's TV, even the publishing industry, like, they're looking for content that has a proven track record. They're looking for content that people have shown there's interest in and people respond to. So if you can create something like that, you got a pretty good chance to get it in front of the right people and maybe build that way. I think it's tougher when you're talking about, an interview-based show, right? How do you flip that to that next level? Or a pop culture show where you're just kind of like, I think the big shows in that space, they're going to still be able to get those looks, but for everybody else, I think it's going to be tougher.
Yeah.
But if you can figure out how to make one of these series, you're setting yourself up pretty nicely. In
terms of like return, is it based off streams, or
what do you mean?
Like, how you proven to them that, like, you make your money back? Is that, through streams or through ads? Or?
Oh, I mean, it's like ad dollars, yeah.
There was ads on Mogul?
Sure. Well, I mean, I think one thing that Gimlet does, it's funny, I was just talking to Raz about this before I came in here.
Shout out to Matt Raz.
Who was listening to Crime Town, ironically. And Gimlet does a really great job of doing custom ads that are really well integrated into the show, where to the point is you might, you listen to Crime Town, there are definitely ads in Crime Town. You don't remember them. Some people might be like, no, you want to remember the ads, but they didn't feel like obtrusive to you.
Sure,
right?
Sure.
You're like, I was so caught up in the story, they just kind of like flowed. And maybe you remember whether it was, I think I remember listening to it and I heard Blue Apron on those. But they do a really smart job of kind of integrating into the show. But yeah, I mean, it's like anything else. How much money the show makes is definitely like a big thing. I mean, I think with Mogul, it got like reviews that blew my mind. Yeah. Like, the New Yorker said it was one of the best podcasts ever. Vulture, New York Magazine said it was one of the best podcasts. I mean, like, it got put up there with really like the biggest shows of the year. So that was amazing to me. And that's the thing you can't really put a number on, but it just has a lot of impact down the road.
What makes Mogul so expensive?
The time, the amount of research, the meticulous kind of approach to it.
Who came up with the name Mogul?
I forget.
You know what I like, that it's basically endless, and what I mean by that is the first Mogul ever done, their inaugural Mogul, was on Chris Lighty, but there's so many people you could do.
Yeah, I mean, I do remember arguing at one point. I was like, was Chris Lighty a mogul? And some people were like, yes.
Yeah.
Some people were like, he was like at that almost mogul level.
Yeah.
So, it's an interesting question, like what makes somebody a mogul, it's impossible to say. I mean, obviously his cultural influence, if you look at the breadth of everything he contributed to, that was like a mogul,
And he was ahead of his time.
He was ahead of his time, but then other people were like, no, the hip hop moguls are
Russell,
Diddy, Leor, Master P, Dre, Suge Knight.
Who would be some future mogul?
It's an excellent question. We are literally hard at work trying to figure that out right now.
Who would you like to see?
I don't want to tip my hand, but
you better not say Bob Ross.
Who? The painter?
Yeah. He's not even alive anymore. I'm playing around.
Actually, there is a painter I want to do that I've been pitching and no one else is into it, but I won't say who it is. That'd be funny.
Who would you want?
Nah. I won't. I don't want to get into it because it's like we're very close, I think, to deciding. So I don't want to.
Okay.
And whoever we don't decide, I still want to do that person in some respect anyway. So I'm going to play that close to the vest. Too saturated out here for me to be giving away ideas.
I don't blame you. Now listen, here goes a big question that listeners would definitely want to know. Because remember, this episode, I want to give people a chance to understand the future of podcasts, but also understand the business of podcasts.
Yeah.
How do you make money off a podcast?
You make money by there is an established marketplace for podcasts. If you have a show, a program that hits certain numbers or reaches a very specific demographic, there's a marketplace out there, and you should be able to, sell ads and at least make some money off of it. I mean, it's like anything else. The larger the audience you have, the more money you're going to make.
What do you think about like direct connect versus brand exposure?
What do you mean by direct?
Well, how people do like
direct response.
Direct response. Yeah. And actually, let me explain direct response for people who may not know. Like when you get an ad, and you may put like at the end like Bevel
slash the read
or slash Brilliant Idiots. Yeah. Versus some ads just like you give them the website and the exposure.
Yeah.
What do you think between?
I think it's shifting. I think that's the big shift in podcasting right now. I was a Stern fan for a lot of years, so people who remember Stern from New York or Philly, which is where I listened to him. When he started, people weren't really sure what to make of that show, right? Like it felt kind of a little bit on like an outsider show. So if you remember, like all the ads were like Car Cash. What was that thing?
Car Cash.
Car Cash, dial a mattress, direct response. Like go to, carcash.com, Howard Stern, get whatever it is, go dial a mattress.
Get you 10% off or
blah, blah, blah.
Whatever, yeah.
And those are like the little scrappier advertisers who are willing to take a chance on a show like Stern. Because the shit he was doing then was controversial and people weren't sure if it was going to hit. Once people realized that Stern wasn't going anywhere, I can remember, like as a fan, Snapple came on. And it wasn't go to Snapple.com to get, 10% off your next iced tea. They just wanted the association. Right?
The exposure.
The brand exposure. So that's what you're starting to see in podcasting.
Do you feel, I always feel, and, obviously I've done ads, meaning going to get ads and understand, I have a lot of different relationships and I understand that people are scared, meaning some companies are still scared to get into podcasting. It's like they understand radio and they're willing to spend their budget dollars on radio, but sometimes not podcasting. So do you feel that direct response sometimes is like, I put a little money here, but I want to see if it works?
Yeah, I think so. And, the other thing that's shifting is Apple is supposedly going to start giving more specific metrics.
That's right.
Sometime soon. And the kind of smart thinking is that once Apple starts giving more specific metrics, that's going to, the term they use is unlock the big brand dollars, right? Because right now those guys, it's never as simple as Jaguars. Like someone at Jaguar says, I like Premium Pete Show, I'm going to advertise on Premium Pete Show. Jaguar probably spends tens of millions of dollars, if not more, and they run that all through an advertising agency, and there's all sorts of language and terms and things that they're looking for. And podcasting hasn't always provided that sort of like very specific metrics the way that, let's say, video might, right? Sure. So the idea is now that Apple might, and I don't know what those metrics are going to look like, but let's say they can say, okay, this listener is this age, this sex, started listening at the 2-minute mark and, faded out after the 15-minute mark consistently across the board. Like, that's the type of very detailed stuff that those advertisers with the big budgets, with the big marketing agencies apparently are looking for. So once that starts, now that money's going to come in. The flip side is if I say a show, let's say, does 100,000 an episode right now, that 100,000 after Apple's new metrics come out, who knows what the numbers are going to look like. You saw the same thing in terrestrial radio. I forget the name of the program. I think it was called like BBM or something like that. Mm-hmm. When they shifted how they gathered ratings, where one day like this station was the number one station in New York for 10 years, and the next day it was number 15. And, like it all depends on how you're counting. So you could see a radical shift. I happen to like direct response, even if the budgets aren't as big, because I think it's kind of the fairest way. Mm-hmm. As the little guy, I still feel like a little guy in the space.
Yeah.
Hey, I say this is what my audience is. Bevel's going to know if they're selling enough razors to fit that audience.
Sure.
Casper's going to know if they're selling enough mattresses.
Yeah.
I think once the Jaguars come in, it gets kind of harder to say, hey, is someone really buying a Jaguar because,
Sure.
They were on The Brilliant Idiots. The flip side of that is I think you're also going to see, and this is something else that makes me a little uncomfortable, is that's going to put even more emphasis on celebrity. Because if I'm a big brand like Jaguar, whose podcast am I going to bet on? Mm-hmm. The celebs, because that's, at least I know I'm getting that celeb cosign. Mm-hmm. So how does that affect the shows that aren't celebrity driven? There might be less money for them. So that's something you got to kind of reach out for. But, like with a direct response, I'll use an example. If people are familiar with Loot Crate, right? Mm-hmm. Which is a box filled with, I guess, how would you describe it? Geek stuff?
Yep.
Geek stuff, movie, comic books, kind of paraphernalia. A show like Fan Bros doesn't have, the same audience that a lot of shows on loudspeakers have. But because Loot Crate was like speaking literally directly to their audience, like the Fan Bros audience is exactly who.
Sure. Very niche.
Perfect storm. Geek show, geek brand, bang. They sold really well. They did very well with Loot Crate. Even though there's not a celebrity host, no disrespect to DJ Ben Hameen and Tatiana. But
Shouts to Ben Hameen.
Shouts to Ben Hameen. But so I think that'll be interesting to see too. Like once these Coca-Colas, whoever you want to call it, Jaguar, come into the space, are they going to gravitate towards the celebrity shows?
I always feel like that in advertising, some of my failures and successes is, dealing with these brands and having to convince them what is going on in this space. And I feel some of these brands are going to make and are making the same mistakes in social. I'll explain to you. With my brand and company, You Gotta Eat This, I've dealt with, man, let me not even mention who I was about to say.
Throw them under the bus.
No, I was about to throw them under the bus, but I've dealt with big brands.
Yeah.
And done, content creation and consultant for them.
Yeah.
Where you would think that they should have 1 million plus followers. They were so late to the social game.
Right.
That they had about 2,000, 3,000 followers. And they needed people like me to help them so much more than they ever would have thought. I feel like brands still to this day don't take social media serious. And the point I'm trying to make is I feel like that's why sometimes, like, what's this podcast thing? Because keep in mind, even think about it. When, I don't remember when, but wasn't it like Meek Mill or Nicki Minaj? Weren't they going against like Joe Budden or somebody where they're like, oh, you got a podcast?
Yeah, well, those days are over.
No, I know, but some people don't still understand it. They take too long to get there.
I'd say in the last year and a half, all that's fizzled, and now podcasts are like 100% legit.
Sure.
I think what you're going to see is maybe not a brand advertising on, let's say, the Premium Pete show, but a brand just having their own podcast. I think that's where the movement's going to be. Like, just why not tell your own story? But they're going to have to be done authentically because, I think a lot of brands rushed into it early. I know, like, Adidas in the sneaker world had a podcast going on for a while, but it felt too packaged.
Sure.
So, like, I think the challenge for the brands they're going to have to let go a little bit. And they're just going to have to let some of these people kind of cook the way they cook and live with the results instead of trying to micromanage. Because I think if you micromanage, people just know it's a branded content and they're just going to kind of not even bother to tune in.
Yeah. For the people listening that may not have heard of Chris Morrow before, list some of the shows that are on the Loudspeakers Network.
The Loudspeakers Network, The Read, The Brilliant Idiots, The Combat Jack Show, Friend Zone, On One with Angela Rye, No Jumper we just added, 85 South we just added, Fam Bros, Getting Grown. Damn, you're really about to make me miss somebody here. Who did I miss? The Vlad Couch.
Lip Service.
Casey Crew. The Corner, boxing show out of Vegas. TK Kirkland. Who? Ed Lover.
So fuck. Hey, listen.
We've never really figured out exactly what's going on there, but yeah.
So who's the most recent? You know what I love about it? You have become as heading Loudspeakers. Like you become like a fucking like a college coach. Trying to recruit people and sign them. Like it's like.
Yeah, I mean it's all kind of bizarre to me because, I mean, people probably don't know my backstory that much, but I've been a writer. And a writer is like a very solitary thing.
Yeah, right. Wrote for Russell Simmons.
Yeah, I was a ghostwriter.
Wrote for Rev Run, right?
Rev Run, Tyrese, Ivanka Trump. Yeah, a lot of people. So
we're gonna get into a little bit of that.
But the thing is that to be a good ghostwriter, you kind of have to get out of the way and be very comfortable kind of playing in the background. Charlamagne, nobody wants a ghostwriter who's trying to kind of be out in front, and you're only really dealing with one person. So, it's kind of been a challenge for me to, I do feel like a coach a lot of the time.
Yeah.
But, it's like, ghostwriting is like playing tennis, it's just you.
I'll give you an example, you know. Mind you.
Yeah.
Your story is definitely an amazing journey. I'll explain to you why. You're a fan of the Combat Jack show.
Yeah.
Reggie tweeted that we had to go on a hiatus because we didn't have a spot years ago. You told them, hey, would you DM him or something like that? And you DM'd them, right? Didn't you?
Nah, he actually wrote something on Twitter. He's like, hey, anybody in radio I need help. I need somebody in radio. Because at that time, if you remember, they wanted to turn Combat Jack show into a radio show.
Yes.
That was the big thing. Like, I need help from someone in radio, and I happen to be working in radio. I'm not like a radio guy, but I was experienced. So I hit him up, and I was like, I don't know if I know that much, but I'm a fan of the show. I'd be happy to grab a cup of coffee and give you my 2 cents, and that's kind of how it kicked off.
Well, just from that, you think about the internet's an amazing place.
Yeah.
But just from that, now it's like you become the coach that is trying to find talent and more talent and more and you've added some amazing talent, you know. I definitely want to keep tax on in my prayers, but what I wanted to say was
did not mention tax.
Okay, with the loss of tax as a business, how does that affect the network? Meaning how do you move on from, because he was a big podcast and he made such big noise so fast.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really look at it from a business standpoint. I just think there was so much energy around Tex. He just has that sort of charisma and energy, and I think he brought people together.
Yeah.
Tex is a guy, I don't want to talk about him in the past tense. Tex is a guy who everybody loved him.
Yeah.
Loves, from Loudspeakers. He just had that energy. And I think if I have a failure as a coach, I'm a little introverted, I'm not necessarily the guy who's going to break out the Doucet and tell stories to everybody and slap it. And then people sometimes they're going to read that like, Chris doesn't fuck with me, or, you know, he's not really paying attention. I'm just kind of, like I said, I'm coming to this from a writing world where my job is to sit back and observe and take notes and watch shit. So for me, I'm always trying to like remind myself that I have to be out there a little bit more that maybe I'm always comfortable with. Whereas, you know, I thought, you know, with tax, you know, like you would come to an engine room and it was a party.
Sure.
You know, it was a fucking party. And I think that's, you know, what we miss more so than anything else. Just like his ability to kind of like have that energy.
Yeah. I still got to give you credit for just having the foresight. You know what I mean? I mean, you know, even having the foresight, like I remember the first day you was brought in Reed, and you were like, kind of like, we're going to see what happens with this. And literally, they're fucking rock stars today.
Rock stars, yeah.
You know, and even having the foresight with tax, you know, and obviously I've told this before, but me and you got into a fucking heated argument because I was like, if you fuck with this kid and anything happens, you better stick by him. And you did stick by him, you know, and I definitely send my prayers and I keep in my prayers all the time. That he's just okay. And but you know, it was amazing that you had the foresight and just to see his talent. Just to, you know?
Well, I mean, my thing is, I don't know if snob's the right word, but like, I don't like chasing stuff. Mm-hmm. To me, if it's obvious and it's a no brainer, then I'm not interested in it. I like to try to get out in front of stuff, and that's what excites me. Finding somebody that, you know, I think has talent or has a voice that's not being heard or can like shake the stuff up a little bit. Like, to me, that's always going to be way more exciting than, you know, like kind of going with an established thing.
Sure.
You know, and look, I don't think you have to be a rocket scientist to sit in a room with a Kid Fury and be like, holy shit, like this guy's got it, you know,
yeah.
Or Tax.
Yeah.
And to be like, to get it straight, like Fury's the one who put me onto Tax.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, like he saw it in him.
Yeah.
Now, he saw the whole thing.
Shouts to Kid Fury.
Yeah, he saw everything. But I mean, he was like, hey, like this guy is one of the funniest dudes I've ever met in my life.
Do you know, me and you used to always, I used to complain about you and Reggie together, saying that communication wasn't the best thing in the world.
Right. As
being the coach, I'm going to continue to quote. That's the new name, actually, the coach.
Coach C.
You know, being the coach of the network of all these podcasts, how important is communication?
I mean, it's the most important. It's, you know, how important is communication with your kids? How important is communication with your wife? How important is communication with your family? Like, 90% of the shit that trips people up is a lack of communication. And, you know, it's something I got to work on.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the one thing I do well is, I hope, I can't say I know, but I hope that people know that I'm pretty non-judgmental. Like, I'll really...
Open-minded.
I'm open. Like, let's hear what it is. Let's tell me about it. Like, whether you're some kid on the street or you're a star, like, I'm just open to anything. I think, again, the thing I have to talk to myself about is I don't think I'm a good encourager. You know what I mean? Like, because I don't like to... I'm somebody... If I have a success and somebody congratulates me, I get kind of embarrassed.
Yeah, me too.
You know, like I'm like, yeah.
I start talking about them.
Yeah. Like I remember, I was thinking about it because I saw this guy this weekend. But the first book I did with Russell Simmons, we had a big party at some fucking club somewhere, and we got word that like it had just hit like #1 on the Times bestseller list, and it was on Oprah that afternoon. And it was like a party with models and blah 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 blah. And I was just kind of like sitting there by myself, you know, like on a chair, just kind of like watching everything. And like this guy like came over to me and was like shaking me by the shirt. He's like, "What the fuck is the matter with you, man?" He's like, "If I was you, I'd be fucking on top of this bar, doing shots, kicking it to girls. Like, wake up," you know, like slapping me in the face. Like he couldn't believe that I was like so kind of like nonchalant about it. And I was like, I'm not like, yeah, it's cool, but I'm already thinking about the next thing, you know. And I think it's interesting. We talked about this on Brilliant Idiots today, which is, are all, you know, it was Schultz, me and Charlamagne talking about, are we all kind of fucked up in a way? in that, we all have various degrees of success, but like there's that thing that drives you to be successful sometimes also stops you from really savoring the success that you do get, because I know for myself, like the second something hits, I'm already like, all right, what's the next thing? What do I got to do next?
You bring up a great point because people like Elliot Wilson and B. Dot, and they get the Jay-Z interview, and it was amazing. It was everything I could imagine. It was amazing. But I always said to myself, in podcasting, like especially from my affiliation and all the years on Combat Jack Show, we would have loved to get Jay-Z, right? But I always said to myself, if you get Jay, what happens next week? Because people are like, oh, you should get Jay-Z, and then okay, you reached his high, but what about next week? What do they do next week? Like what do they put out next week? Where people ain't like, yo, you went from Jay-Z to fucking Chris Morrow. You know what I mean? I'm playing with you, but you understand what I'm saying?
I got something for that. No, I mean, I think it's a good problem to have.
Yeah. Okay. I agree with that. I
didn't watch it. I'll be honest. I was probably like, I can't even say salty. I mean, I knew that was coming. It was just a matter of when.
Of course.
But I think it's good for podcasting. I mean, when you talk about Nicki Minaj and Meek dissing Budden or whoever it was.
I don't remember who it was, but yeah,
whoever could be a year ago. Like, Jay-Z just did a fucking podcast, so I guess this shit is legit. Now, look, obviously it's on Tidal, and he has a relationship with those guys, and it kind of makes sense. But I mean, I think in the bigger picture, what you're really talking about is like a treadmill. Like we're all in this sort of treadmill.
Yeah, and not to cut you off, but you said even you think about. With the Reed or Brilliant Idiots, when they reach a certain plateau, like what's next? But did you say about the treadmill? My bad.
I just think when you start a podcast, or in my case, when you start a podcast network, you're just so excited to get going that you're not thinking 4 or 5 years in the future. And I think probably collectively we all have these moments now where we're like, damn, we've really been doing this for a long time.
Yeah.
Week in, week out. Now, granted, it's an hour or two out of your week. It's not a TV show. It's not a movie. Like, it's not that labor intensive.
But it's still a lot of work.
It's a lot of work, and if you're competitive and you want to kind of keep up with people or beat them, it's a lot of pressure. But, I mean, I think that gets back to kind of like what my philosophy has always been, which is do a podcast because you want to do a podcast. Do a podcast because... hey, I'm Pete. I just really want to talk to people that I find interesting every week.
Sure.
And have these conversations with them. And I think it might put some people on to some game or tell them about stories they don't know or help inspire them in their journey. If that's your motivation, you can keep going forever. There are going to be rough patches and then there are going to be easier passage. If your motivation, I'm not talking about you, but I'm saying in general, if your motivation is like, this is the hot new thing, I want to do it, I want to make X amount of money, you're going to burn out after 10, 15 weeks. Because it's just, I mean, even you look at Rap Radar, I mean, I feel like, they hit a patch.
Yeah.
Now, I think they got their mojo back, obviously.
Yeah.
It's rough.
But they're doing a lot of other things. I mean, hey, listen, at one point in time, they were doing 4 or 5 episodes a week.
Well, I mean, yeah, I didn't want to say, I mean, it was like the same thing with Nori, like, I was like, and I even said this to Nori's guys at one point, when I was talking to them, I was like, you got to pace yourself.
Sure. Did you try to sign them?
Yeah.
And just didn't work out?
I think, I can never get like a straight, truthfully kind of convo with those dudes. But like, I think Nori liked what we did and wants to do a version of it himself is kind of my...
Like a network, I mean?
I think he just wants to be in control of his own ship. But, I wish him well.
Yeah. What about Rap Radar? You never tried to sign them, right? Before they went to Tidal or anything?
Nah, I mean, I've had some convos with Elliot in the past, but I mean, look, I think there was a moment in the very early days that we could have gobbled up like a ton of stuff, and for whatever reason, we didn't. But it's also okay because, like those are all big personalities who are like going to demand a lot of.
Sure.
And like, look, like I know that people even around here still are like, Chris, you spend too much time with the read or too much time with the idiots. You know, like if you multiply that times Rap Radar or Nori, like,
yeah,
you know, that's a lot.
What about Desus and Morrow? You try to sign too, right?
Sure.
I mean, it's amazing to see those guys are out here.
Hey, I mean, look, I saw their talent. You know, like all I can do is if I see something, I can't even. You know, like they were already hot by the time I tried to talk to them.
Who's that company that signed D-Ray, the activist, D-Ray McKesson?
Oh, Crooked Media.
And then what, they do a lot of things?
They've really blown up within the last year, but like they're out of D.C. and they're like very, very focused on politics. Like they just have that one lane and they do it very well.
I enjoy it. I like him. I like him a lot. You know, but I like to see people doing it. You know what? Let's take a quick break. Internet's, we're sitting here with my friend, the founder, co-founder, and a bunch of other things, Loudspeakers Network, Mr. Chris Morrow. We're talking about the future of podcasting, the business of podcasting, and all that. We'll be right back. Cheers.
It's Ebro Darden. Ebro in the morning, Hot 97. You listen to the Premium Pete Show. Sick fuck named it after himself, asshole.
And we're back, sitting here with the one and only Chris Morrow. Listen, you know, the business of podcasting, right? Yeah. When you think about it, you knew radio, but when did you really learn? Did you learn a lot of stuff on the fly?
Man, I learned everything on the fly. I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. Like, I had a big meeting the other day with some people, but I told them straight up, I was like, I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. Like, my brother-in-law is someone who has started a bunch of like tech companies and sold them off pretty successfully, and he definitely knows what he's doing, and he's someone that I've leaned on for advice.
I remember you mentioned him years ago.
Yeah, and you know, he's really smart, and he knows a lot about the space. Not so much podcasting, though. He's learned a lot about it in the past couple of years, but just about how to like start a company and the right way to do it and the right way to sell it. And you know, he's very smart in that regard. And I remember him telling me a couple of years ago, he's like, well, you know, according to the book, according to conventional wisdom, you're doing everything completely wrong. But just keep doing it because it's working. Yeah. Like, don't try to, like, I don't know spreadsheets. I don't know, but, you know, like, I'm totally out of my element. I just kind of go off my gut instinct in most situations. You know, I'm kind of conservative just in terms of, like, taking, I mean, obviously I took big chances in terms of doing this, but, you know, I'm not somebody, obviously, if you know Loudspeakers, like, who's going to take all our money and throw a crazy party or try to make a big splash. Like, I'm just kind of more like, let's just do this. Let's make the shows week in, week out. And, you know, in retrospect, I don't know, maybe, you know, I'm now seeing the value. Like, even the Christmas party, you know, we had the party that you came to last year. And, you know, I was kind of being like a little Scrooge-like, you know, I was like, we don't need, you know, why are we going to spend this money on a fucking, you know, party? It's a waste. And, you know, Matt Raz was like, because people who work together need to come together in the holidays and have drinks and hang out and have fun. I was like, good point. You know, like.
That was nice. It was,
it was cool. It was cool. Like, it was a nice vibe. And I was like, damn, we should be doing more stuff like that.
You know, and I feel like, not just saying this for you in general, I think what it does is it shows that the company cares. You know what I mean? It shows that, and it really makes people, you know, get out there and bullshit with each other and you know, even stuff like that. You know what I mean? Like when you say like you don't know what you're doing, but you know, obviously you know what you're doing. You're following the rules, but you're also creating new rules. Right. You know, with the older podcasts, newer podcasts coming in, you know, it's obviously you have to treat, you know, one this way, one another way. What are some of the struggles that you have had with, say, you know, bringing on new podcasts or just maintaining older podcasts?
I mean, I think the biggest struggle is making sure everybody feels like they're getting enough attention.
Sure.
You know, and like Fury kind of helped me see this a while ago. I was talking to him about it. He was like, you know, Chris, you realize that this is just us in the studio, and it is kind of what it is. But he's like, you got to understand, the world really thinks you're running a record label. Like, people really think that, like, you've got, like, offices and, you know, you can sign people and make your, you know, because I forget who it was, but he was saying, like, someone had reached out to him and be like, could you please introduce me to Chris Morrow? You know, like, because that'll put me on, you know, and his was introduce you to Chris Morrow, you know, like whatever. But he's like, you got to understand that's how people see this.
I see it too.
And I was like, damn, you're right. And, you know, like one of the things that I'm like struggling with, and it's kind of been even tougher the last year just because like physically I haven't been like feeling great. It's like a lot of people just get at me with ideas or projects. I can't even hit everybody back. And like, you know, I can remember being on the other side of that fence. I can remember being the guy hitting up people when I was in my 20s or even in my 30s, you know, like trying to get on and like, oh, if this person just responds to my email, like that might be the door that's opening for me and I can get, and like, I just don't hit people back. And like that alone is like very difficult for me because I don't ever want to be that person, but like, I just can't keep up with it.
You know, it's funny that you mentioned that and, you know, because it's like, you know, you think about it, you know, in this day and age of podcasting, right,
Yeah.
and how much it's evolved,
Yeah.
and where we are today, and the things that you've been able to accomplish, you know, people have hit me and like,
Right.
yo, tell Chris Morrow I want to get on the network. You know, my friend from Florida, he has like a business podcast. I forgot the fuck what was it called, Fourth Quarter Life.
Okay.
I mean,
Yeah.
shout out to Kaz. He's like, you gotta get me on the network. I always tell people, and not saying that he's not popping, if you don't have a vehicle, meaning your podcast, that is not moving, fuck you want to be on loudspeakers for? What could they do for you?
You're just going to get frustrated with me.
Yeah.
But the flip side of that is like, I always think about the story. I think it was like Big Sean coming up to Kanye and rhyming for him outside of a radio station. And I'm like,
Great point.
how many times did people come up and rhyme for Kanye? And he's probably just like this, you know, like, but he took the time to listen and
look what we have.
look what he got.
Yeah.
And how many, one of these guys could be Big Sean of podcasting.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I can't listen to this dude's podcast. He only has 2,000 listeners. There could be a big talent out there.
Here goes the big question.
Yeah.
We love podcasting. You love the podcasting.
Sure.
You get in the game, you get jaded. I love sneakers, but now I hate them sometimes.
Yeah,
You
I
know?
know what you're saying.
You know, has the business made you feel like that? Like, because, you know, and the reason why I bring that up for is because you're just sitting there saying, like, you know, somebody comes to you and you're like, you know, do you listen to him? He could be the next big podcast.
Right.
But you've heard so many, you're seeing so many emails that sometimes, like,
It's just the volume is difficult. You know, I know editors in the publishing industry, like, if you go to their bedrooms, they're like 7 manuscripts like piled next to their bed, and they just can't read that many books. Podcasting is kind of the same thing. Like, you just can't. There's a limited amount of podcasts you can listen to every week. I can't listen to 25 podcasts a week.
Yeah.
You know, but I don't think I get jaded because at the end of the day, like, I'm just interested in people's stories.
Sure.
You know, like, I'm interested in sharing good stories. So I think it's more a case of like, I've got to push myself to find those stories. You know, the way you listen to a Ear Hustle, you know, and you're just like, wow, this shit was amazing. You know, I think I've told people before, like, I like this show called Hardcore History. And I was coming back from upstate New York last week, and I was listening to an episode about kind of what people were thinking after the nuclear bombs went off at the end of World War II and how that changed the country's perception towards war. And just like, and it's like a 6-hour podcast. It was just like crazy in the weeds of like the first post-nuclear America. And the reason I had chosen, you know, I'd been on my phone for like months, and I was like, I don't know if I really want to listen to this. And then all the shit with Trump and North Korea, I was like,
Sure.
This is feeling a little bit more relevant. And just like listening to that podcast literally has changed like my outlook. Like, it's reminded me why so many things are important and what's not important. Just like really confronting the realities of X amount of countries having nuclear weapons and what that means. And how when we created our nuclear arsenal, they thought it was going to be 25 years until the Russians got one, let alone anybody else. Like, the way it's panned out was not the plan. Like, we are in uncharted territory. Like, they had a quote in the podcast from this British philosopher, I think Bertrand Russell, who was like, you can expect a man to maybe be able to walk a tightrope for 2 days, but can you expect a man to walk a tightrope for 200 years? And that's basically like the bet we've made with ourselves is we got to walk this tightrope for the rest of eternity if we're not going to blow our whole heads off, because it was cool when the U.S. had these things and that was the deterrent to stop everybody else. Everybody else got them. Trump can bluff whoever he wants. Once one of these things goes off, it's lights out for everybody. So just kind of listen. But again, it was all because I listened to that podcast and I was like, oh my God, like this is what the focus has to be. Nuclear weapons, all this other shit that we're worried about is irrelevant almost. Like, this is the biggest issue of our era and we're not even talking about it anymore. Sure. Like, and I'm not trying to go off on like a no nukes rant here, but like, at least from my age, like even in the 70s and the 80s, there was still like a little bit of the, this is a serious thing. No nukes. I don't know if anybody remembers, they had a show called The Day After, which was a really big deal when I was in grade school. It showed you what America would look like after nuclear. And that scared the shit out of people. Like, we had to have meetings. Should you let the fifth graders watch The Day After? Is it going to frighten them for the rest of their lives? Like, it was a real thing that was present. I don't think people think about it anymore. And like, it's real. And then if you think about the fact that there are all these suitcase bombs that were, you know, part of the Russian arsenal, and then when the Soviet Union dissolved, like nobody even knows. Like, this is the most pressing kind of issue that we're facing right now. But again, it was because I took the time to listen to like a 6-hour podcast about it and really get into it. So I say all that to say, like, that's why I'm not jaded, because I know that if you find the right topic, if you approach it the right way, if you give it the treatment it deserves, there's a lot of important podcasts out there that haven't been made. It's just going to take more work than, you know, maybe a couple of years ago.
If someone wants to get on the network, you know they come in, you know those emails come in, what would you give them advice to want to pitch to you? Like, what would someone have to pitch to you that would, you know, make you want to look at what they're doing?
Give me a concept. You know, like if you hit me and say, hey, I got a show, you know, it's kind of like got a barbershop feel. We talk about politics. We talk about a little bit of sports. We talk a little bit about music. I'm probably not going to listen to it, just to be completely honest. Just because, and you know, that's also the issue that I kind of face, which is, shit, somebody might have the funniest fucking show in the entire world out there, but it just feels like too many other shows right now. But if someone had called me and said, hey, I got a show where we're going inside San Quentin and we're going to talk to inmates about X, Y, and Z, and we're going to have access to the ward. Okay. I want to hear more about that.
New shit.
That feels different to me.
Yeah.
Or maybe there's something in your family, an extraordinary story in your family that spans generations, and you slowly start weaving together the story. And, you know, again, it doesn't take much. You could record this on an iPhone. But, you know, this is the story of my uncle who did this, or my mother and her sister who did, you know, whatever the case may be. That's going to feel different to me. That's going to catch my attention.
You know, well, hopefully someone could send you something that can catch your attention.
Yeah.
The do's and don'ts of podcasting. Sound quality obviously has to be great.
Sure.
I mean, we're living in a day and age now where podcasting is so big. If you don't have, like, people who have bad sound quality, people just turn that shit off.
Yeah.
What would you say are some of the other, like, you know, that must-haves of podcasts? Like, is it once a week, do you believe, is the blueprint? Could they do more?
Well, I mean, I think the key is you have to be consistent. I think if you start off once a week, you have to stay once a week. I think if you say, hey, I'm going to do a 8-part series, and this is
Season 1?
Season 1, and then we're going to take a break for 2 weeks or 3 weeks, whatever the case may be. That works too. But I think what you really have to do is kind of lay it out for the audience and kind of make a pact with them. And if you're upfront with them and you let them know what they're getting into coming in, they'll probably fuck with you. But if, you know, we have shows or have had shows on the network that, like, just didn't do a show for X amount of weeks. And in my mind, I'm like,
what the fuck you doing?
But I also understand, hey, you're not really getting paid for this. You got other shit. You got a life to live. Like, I can't.
But Chris, you have to, and I tell people this all the time, you can't give up on something, that you don't see something yet, because you never know when it comes. Like, I remember you used to tell me, like, when years ago, I was like, I think I wanted to even leave combat back then. And you're like, bro, I think you said you put in all this time, you should at least reap some of the benefits. Like me,
my father always gave me a good piece of advice. He always said, don't leave one job until you have another one. He's like, you're always way more attractive to an employer coming from a job than coming from no job. You got way more leverage coming from the Combat Jack show, even if you're unhappy on the Combat Jack show, even if you don't feel like you're being utilized, you still have that spot, as opposed to, what's Pete doing? I don't know. He's doing a little bit, like, use that leverage. And I thought that was good advice, and I've always tried to live by that. And that's always what I tell people, which is, you might be frustrated. You might not feel like it's going the way you want it to go. The world doesn't see that. The world sees you in a coveted spot. I'm on this podcast. I'm talking to this guy every week. I'm talking to that guy.
Sure.
I'm in the mix. Like, so what you have to do is plan it out so that one day they wake up and you're gone because you've leveraged it into the next thing.
Sure.
I'm not saying you have to stick around forever and be unhappy, but, and I've seen this with other hosts on other shows, which is they get frustrated and they just kind of like pack it in without having the next plan. And like, hey, you gotta parlay it into something else, especially if you put in a year.
Sure.
Especially if you put in 2 years. Sure. Don't up and quit then. That's really the time to stick it out. And, you don't know where the opportunity is going to come from, and you don't know what the opportunity is going to look like. Before we started recording, we were talking about Ben Hameen from Fan Bros.
Yeah.
Been doing this for years.
Yep.
Parlayed it into a writing gig on American Gods.
It's crazy. I'm so happy for him.
Directly off the podcast. Probably wasn't his plan when he got into this. Didn't know it was going to happen, but he kept plugging. He kept at it. He believed in what he was doing. He kept making connections.
It's the stepping board.
It's a stepping board. You just don't know. And, there's, it could have never happened. But he had that faith, and he kept plugging, and it's an amazing opportunity.
I'm glad he didn't give up, because I know sometimes, he was challenged and
he's frustrated.
Frustrated.
Yeah,
and it's
absolutely.
normal. I mean, I've been frustrated. As we wind this episode down, before I want to get to book ghostwriting and book writing, but before we get to that, I think we mentioned, how do you make money from podcasting? But I want to get your advice on, how does someone try to make money from meaning, what do you think they should reach out to, advertisers, set up an email? Like, what's your opinion that people should try to make money?
I mean, I would say, make it be known. I think a lot of people at advertising agencies and companies listen to podcasts. I would let it be known. I think if there's a brand that you think makes sense for your show and you're hitting a niche market that would make sense for that brand, let them know about you. Talk to them in the show. Have your fan base tweet about it. Like, make it a running gag in your show. Like, I don't think it takes a whole lot of tweets for someone running a Twitter account to notice that a particular podcast is talking about their product.
Sure. I've been recently shouting out Air Hustle, and I don't think they know if I'm involved in podcasts, but recently they've been, retweeting and liking and seeing, and I just wanted to let them know, like, and this is obviously off the topic of getting money. I just wanted to let them know, like, yo,
I support you.
Yeah. And I'm in this game, but I support you.
I mean, that's one way. I mean, I think if your numbers are strong enough, and nobody knows what strong enough means anymore. When we started, 25,000 an episode was a big podcast. That's like just being big enough to maybe get something out. Try to get down with the network like loudspeakers. It's going to be, it won't happen as quickly as you probably want it to happen in terms of the ad revenue. But, I won't quote them directly, but there's someone who I think is very smart in this space. And he was saying, everyone's rushing into podcasting right now. A lot of people are going to be bitterly disappointed over the next couple of years in terms of the numbers they see, the money they make, and they're all going to go away. And the people left standing are going to be the ones who win, because then the money will show up eventually. And if you stick out the cold winter, you're going to be in a pretty good position, but you're really going to have to stick out a cold winter. So I would also say, if you jump into it for the long haul. If you only really have a stomach for 25 episodes, 30 episodes, it's probably not going to work out.
Yeah.
But if you can ride it out for a couple of years, which is no small commitment, for
No,
sure,
it's not.
You know?
Bro, I've been doing fucking episodes, man, for a long time, man. You know?
But you're in the mix.
Yeah, I am. Lastly, with the podcast questions, what's next for the Loudspeakers Network?
It's a good question. There's a lot of stuff at play right now. I think it's going to be more stuff like Mogul. I'm really committed to that. I want to see more stories like that told. I like the in-depth quality to it. It's just going to take a while to get them together. But we're really committed to doing stuff like that.
Let's get to the ghostwriting real quick.
Yeah.
How does that even happen? Like, does somebody even like approach you, or like, for instance, with Russell Simmons, how did that even start, the relationship?
It was a total accident.
How?
I had been writing, like freelance journalism. I wrote a big piece for The Source about a guy named John Forte, if anybody remembers him.
Of course.
Yeah.
I just had a baby. Shouts to John Forte.
Shout out John Forte. That made a little bit of noise, and off of that, I got a job writing radio scripts for a company, which is how I got into radio.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, Russell had, I don't know, New Yorkers might remember this, he had kind of like an inspirational moment on Power 105. I forget what they called it, but it was basically like a minute of him just kicking it about whatever. And they had hired somebody to do the writing, and a publicist I knew through the radio thing was like, that guy's no good, but this guy, no, Chris could do it. Shout out Carrie Davis. I haven't talked to her in ages and ages, but she was a publicist that I worked with. And I went in there, and we kind of hit it off a little bit. And for a year, I was writing these little scripts for him, every morning or, 4 or 5 times a week about whatever was on his mind. And we built a relationship, and I kind of hung around the office a little bit. And then finally I was like, fuck it, we could turn this into a book. Like, we could make this a self-help book. So I, like, on my own kind of put it together and, like, prepared it and kind of, like, laid it out in book form. And I went there, I was like, yo, let's do a book. And of course I was like, oh yeah, I've been planning to do a book, like that for her, and I was like, damn. But to his credit, and I give, a lot of the stuff I've experienced over the last 10, 15 years, like, I give Russell a lot of credit for it, because I didn't really have much of a name at that time. He could have taken it, and because there were plenty of people who would have, liked to have done it with him, but he kept me part of it. And there was a lot of bullshit and back and forth and rah, but that's Russell. And eventually we got it done. I had no idea what I was doing. I'd never written anything like that before. I really just kind of bullshitted my way through it. But I think Russell respects that sort of hustle. Like, because I think Russell's a guy who's bullshitted his way through a lot of situations. So he likes people who kind of are willing to take that sort of shot. And it was a success. It did well. The party I was talking about, number 1 or whatever it was, top 5. And it's like anything else. Once you have something, I think what a lot of people don't understand is half the battle is just proving you can do something.
Sure.
No matter what industry you're in. This dude actually knows how to write a book. He can figure out, or even if he doesn't know how to write a book, he knows how to bullshit his way through it. Once you can prove you can do anything, then the opportunities are going to come.
Some people only want to check.
Well, I'll tell you a funny story.
Business,
I'll tell you a story about that. I won't name her because I like her a lot. Maybe it doesn't reflect her in the best light. The negotiations started with this book, and I was already writing it. And for whatever reason, they weren't paying me. They weren't paying me. They're going to pay me. This has to happen, that has to happen, and we're getting further along in the process. And the book agent I was working with at the time was like, Chris, this is not the way shit gets done. This isn't right. What they're doing to you isn't right. Walk away from this project. Just quit. I'll find you another project down the road, but just walk away from this. This is bullshit. I was like, what? So I can go home and sit on my couch and watch the NBA and, smoke weed and eat Chinese food? I was like, fuck that. Like, this is a shot. I know a shot when I see one. Like, this is a chance to write a book with Russell Simmons. I'm not walking away from anything. And I essentially wrote the whole book before I didn't get a check until like after it was done. And yeah, technically it wasn't supposed to go down that way. I didn't have any leverage.
Sure.
I had to take that shot. I had to prove that I can do it. And I think a lot of people, and I don't want to make it like, the younger generation, because, people at all ages do it. But I think one of the most important things in life is understanding your leverage and understanding what you can get away with. And look, if you're a genius and you're just brilliant at something, leverage doesn't matter, because you're just going to be so creative that the world's going to come to you. I don't happen to be that type of genius. I don't happen to be that creative. Like, I got to figure out the angles. I got to figure out the leverage. And I knew damn well in that position, I'd written a couple things. I'd written a book even before that. I didn't have any leverage. If I write a bestseller with Russell Simmons, guess what?
Sure,
I got some leverage. So you know what? I didn't say I'm not doing this till I get a check. I waited for the check. And yeah, it sucked. It sucked to work on something for a long time for that check, but the checks came, and I got a lot more checks after that. And I think people make a mistake sometimes where they're like, I don't know if it's pride or they're worried about getting played, but you know what? It's all right to get played. It's all right.
Why do you say that? What do you mean?
Because a lot of people shut themselves off before it even gets to that point. This guy's trying to
play me.
I talk about this with Charlamagne, and he agrees with this too. The look is more important than the check. Always take the look. Never turn down a look for a check. It's a big mistake. And look, I come from a situation where I didn't have a lot of money, but, I was never like starving, living hand to hand. It's easy. Maybe some people really need that check in a way I didn't need that check. But as a rule of thumb, take the fucking look, because the more looks you get, if you handle them the right way, if you do what you're supposed to do, if you take advantage of them, then the checks will come. But to shut something down before it even gets to that point because there's not a check attached to it, yeah, you're going to kill yourself. And yeah, people are going to take advantage of you. People are going to have you do something for $5 they should have paid you $20 to do, or $1 that they should have paid you $20. But you're getting yourself out there. You're getting people familiar with him. You're showing what you can do. And it's like what I said, if you prove that you can do something, that's 75% of the battle. Now you've established that. So, I don't want to tell people to go out there and get exploited. I don't want to tell people to go out there and settle for less than they're worth, because ultimately you do have to get what you're worth. But I think in your gut, people know whether it's a look that's right for them or not. And I think a lot of people get intimidated by the prospect of putting in the work and potentially failing at that look. And then it becomes easier to say, he wanted me to do this for that. And she wanted me to, whatever. There's no check. I'm not. Take the look, man. Yeah. The look, if you love what you do, you got to love what you do. Sure. But if you love what you do, a look is a no-brainer to me.
Hey, listen, it's strong words, And, I think many people have to understand that and I know it's a corny cliche, but your network becomes your net worth, And I know it's corny. I feel like it's overused, but I do believe it's true. And I believe when you said that girl suggested you, you know what I mean? Look how that happened. The girl was like, hey, Russell, you should fuck with this guy,
Just because I put in the work on other stuff. Like, she saw me as someone like, this guy's bright enough, but he shows up. You got to show up. I think Norman Mailer said, showing up is 95% of the battle. You just got to be prepared to keep going to the places, putting in the work. Don't try to, what's in it for me? Because if you're in this world that we're in, the media world, the entertainment world, whatever you want to call it, there are a lot of people who want your look.
Yeah.
A lot of people.
You know, we're talking about books, but you brought up a great point. You know, I think people see or hear a name like Loudspeakers Network, and I'm proud to see that it's become, you know, a respected name.
Yeah.
People automatically attach success to it, maybe money. How long, or are you still, that you're able to just do this, that you're able to eat off of, you know, like live, like have a job, you know, for Chris Morrow, so to speak?
I think the foreseeable future.
Yeah.
I mean,
so it's still a process.
I mean, I'm doing fine now.
Okay.
You know, we didn't make
But it took, how long did it take?
A couple years.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, I poured a couple years into this without making any money.
Sure.
When I was still doing other jobs, 9 to 5, I was still writing books. And I keep writing books. You know, I just did a book with Charlamagne, you know, that came out recently.
Oh, you did By Privilege?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't even know that. Look at you, sneaky fuck you.
I mean, Charlamagne, you know, he really, like, controlled that process. Like, he's, you know, I didn't write it. You know, I really was more just, like, helping him through the process. But, like, you know, I was working on it. And it's a lot, you know, like, it's a lot to run a network and write books. You know, I can remember just when, like, writing one book seemed like it was going to make my head explode. And now to, you know, juggle them with everything else. But I'm just afraid to turn down opportunity, man. Like, I'm allergic to turning down opportunity. Like, I could have, you know, Loudspeakers could be doing whatever. Like, if Charlamagne says, okay, time to work on the next book.
Sure, let's go.
Let's go. Like, I don't know how I'm going to do it, but, like, let's go.
It's been amazing, not only as just watching from a distance, but also being a friend of his. It's been amazing to see his
work
fucking,
ethic is unmatched.
Insane, man.
It's
this
unmatched.
guy is all over the fucking place, but he's doing things.
Yeah. He's the other one. He's not going to... I mean, those are the people I get inspired by. Russell Simmons, same thing.
Yeah.
This guy's as hustling as hard today as he was in 82 at Def Jam.
Yeah.
Like, that guy has not slowed down for 1 second. Charlamagne is hustling just as hard as he did on whatever station he was in South Carolina. You know, like, these are people who just, like...
People are just seeing it now, like, meaning, like, you know, but people don't see what goes behind that and what it takes. That's why I was mentioning about the loudspeakers.
Yeah.
Because it's like, you know, even with Combat Jack, I tell people all the time, it took us years before anyone seen money. I always use this line as something that keeps me just understanding life. I was telling someone, we were down in festivals, signing autographs and taking pictures with people. I wasn't making $1 from Combat Jack show.
Right.
We weren't making $1. It just goes to show you that, like, how long, like, because people automatically think, oh, you know, they see something, they automatically think you're okay, you know?
Yeah, no, for sure. And, you know, but through that, Reggie got Mogul.
Of course.
Through Fan Bros, Ben Hameen got American Gods.
Sure.
Your whatever might be right around the corner.
Yeah. I'm waiting. I'm here to hit it right out the park.
Knock it out the park. You know, you just got to keep showing up, putting in the work.
Get to bat, man.
Don't get frustrated. You just got to believe that it's out there for you. But, you know, you have to put in the work. There's no other way around it.
With the books, with writing books, and just being a creative and being an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
You ever hit like a writer's block or a creative
all the
block?
time?
How do you get out of it?
You work. I've never started a book and not open up my computer and said to myself, there's no fucking way I'm going to be able to do this. Like, that's the first thing I think when I start every book. Like, this is the one where they're going to figure out I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. This is the one where they're going to realize I was a fraud. The editor is going to walk in and fucking pull this computer out of my hand and throw it out. Like, I think that I thought that for the first book. Whatever book I start next, I'm going to think that too. Like, I've never been like, oh yeah, I got this. Like, every single book feels impossible. Every book feels like I can't do this. It's too hard. I'm too busy. I'm not a good enough writer. I don't have a good enough understanding of whatever the case may be. I feel that every single book, but the fuck are you going to do? Like, quit? Yeah. I mean, I can remember I've been fired from one book, which thankfully, to my credit, was the Ivanka Trump book. Mm-hmm. But I can remember walking around during the height of that shit and just thinking, if I could just get hit by a car in my legs, like break my legs, don't kill me, but just fucking break my legs so I could just get out of this thing. Like, but I can't quit. Like, and she should have, like we hated each other. Like we could barely be in the same room with each other. But I just kept showing up because I was like, I can't quit this fucking gig. Like, I just don't know how to do it. And then she fired me because she's a Trump. But I mean,
She's a piece of shit.
Like with her, I can't say I feel bad for her, but like I can't say I feel bad for her because she's too smart not to know what's going on. But that would be a tough guy to have as a father. I will say that.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine.
Yeah.
Man, we went over so much.
Covered a lot of
stuff.
ground here.
I mean, great stuff. And before we close, I mean, I think I said it before, but I'm definitely proud of you.
Thank you. Likewise.
And I know you have said that to me, and I appreciate. Like it's funny because like a lot of people always ask me, "Are you on loudspeaker?" I'm like, look, they're family. Right. I'm over here doing my thing, and they're family, and that's all that needs to be known. But I do appreciate, and I am proud of. Just where everything has gone. I've come to events that you invited me with the pure, just proud.
Absolutely.
And I'm excited to see what's next. I'm excited to also create what's next.
And I'm proud of you, man. I'm proud that you, I think you've been open about it. Like the whole thing with leaving Combat Jack was a rough patch for you. Like that wasn't an easy thing to navigate. But I think you're in a better place. Mentally, you might be driving down the turnpike at 1:00 this morning, like
what the
looking
fuck
at the
am I
gas,
doing?
being like, what the fuck am I doing? But like, just in talking to you, you're in a better place.
Yeah. And
you seem more at peace. You were a fucking mess when that shit was happening.
Yeah. I guess because it was just, something that I religiously did. And, it's hard sometimes to make changes, you know what I mean? And while with people that you're used to doing things with all the time, you know what I mean? It's
sure.
It's kind of like leaving high school or leaving college, and it was hard. But I got love for those guys, man. Well, look, there's things I didn't like, but life is too short to fucking hold any grudges, man.
And do your own thing.
Yeah. Lastly, this is the last thing. I was telling my guy Isaiah today.
Yeah.
That sometimes, and this goes into retrospective, speaking of the creative block, sometimes I have to find quiet because you have to understand, for me and people who are listening, I have an older daughter who I have to make sure she's okay. She's going to college next year. I have a 2-year-old son. I have an ex-wife. I have a lady. I have a mother. I have a lot of things going on. I got different things that I do, and my mind is noisy.
Yeah.
And sometimes I try to escape to find peace.
Yeah.
Even like sometimes like he may go to daycare and she goes to work and I'll just run home just to sit in the back for a second just to find peace. Even sometimes, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I like to do this. Men may like to take, I take showers, but sometimes, men, I'll jump in a bath and just sit in a hot bath.
Epsom salt.
And why not?
Yeah.
And do you ever feel like your mind is noisy?
I mean, you just told the story of my life, especially over the last year. Like, just the other day, I was like, all I wanted to do was get in my car and just drive. And I didn't even know, like, just get me away from all this shit. Mm-hmm. And I think when you are struggling physically, it makes it even noisier because then you have the noise of, all right, well, when am I going to get better? I don't know. So yeah, I really struggle with that. I don't always do it, but I think for everybody, you have to have some form of meditation in your life. And maybe it's an actual meditation practice. Maybe it's what people call walking meditation or moving meditation, where it's not, sitting down and repeating a mantra, but, gardening could be a form of meditation for you. For a lot of people, I think running is a form of meditation. For me, for a long time, it was playing basketball.
Fishing is peaceful to me.
Fishing is peaceful. And when I stopped being able to play basketball, I'm realizing now in retrospect, like, that was a big loss for me, bigger than I realized, because when I play ball, that's all I'm thinking about. I'm thinking about the game. You know, I might be mad at the guy I'm playing with, this guy, but, like, I'm not thinking about anything else. I'm literally locked into the game. And once I lost that, it took me a year or two to realize that was actually a big void. And I've had to kind of try to figure out, how do you replace that? And I think the biggest struggle is, and I think this is going to become something we all face, is I let social media become that replacement. And that's the worst thing. Sure. And, now when I need that quiet, or I feel the noise, I might go on Twitter and Facebook, and it's like artificial sweeteners, man. It's like the exact opposite of quiet. It's just more noise, but we're addicted to it and we gravitate towards it. And it's interesting, you said, like, it's amazing how you and Reggie connected on Twitter, and, like, that's what really sets stuff off. And isn't social media amazing? It is, and that's true. But over the last couple months, I think I'm done. Like, I think I'm going to disconnect.
Really?
Yeah, I think it's poisonous, man. Like, I'm really becoming convinced of that.
But what about for pushing stuff?
Fuck that. Like, or, like, just push. Just go on and push and but, like, I'm spending so much time. This is going to sound like I don't know, kind of an asshole thing to say, but, like, ingesting the opinions of people who I don't respect I don't care. And I'm getting worked up, and I'm reacting to it, and I'm following these. And it's like, these are people, like, if they were in the room with me, I wouldn't even talk to them. I would pick up on their energy and see they're not worth it. And I'm completely invested in their opinions, and it's shaping how I see the world. And I'm getting it just doesn't feel good to me anymore. Like, I'm becoming very aware, because I think another thing is, like, when you're sick, you have to kind of figure out, like, what's helping me and what's hurting me. Sure. What's helping me get better, and social media is not helping me. Like, it's not actively, there's nothing wrong. Like, I like going on Facebook and I see my nieces or my nephews. That's cute. But everything else, it's empty calories, man. It's drinking soda and it's eating sweets. Like, you got to eat greens and drink water and eat whole foods. You got to read books. You have to get into stuff above the surface level. And social media, there's some people who are very good at it. I'm not good at it, so it makes it easier for me not to get too tied up into it, because I've never figured out, like, how to have that presence that people react to. But look, if you figured out social media and you can put something out there and 10,000 people retweet it and it's driving your business, okay. But if you're not, stop feeding it. Sure. Stop feeding that fucking beast, because, my wife sent me an article about teenage girls and iPhones. My daughter's 10, and they were describing the patterns of addiction in terms of how people treat their phones. And it's like, if you look at how you interact with your phone, you're addicted to your phone.
No, most definitely.
My phone is next to my fucking bed at night.
Think about how many people have problems in their relationships. I mean, I speak to so many friends, guys, that say, like, their girl tells them all the time, put the phone down.
Put the phone down. What do your kids see, man? My kids, all they see me is sticking my face in a phone. Yeah. And, my daughter's saying, when do I get a phone? Well, you're not getting a phone. Well, you spend I'm working. She's like, but you're always on Twitter. Well, I have to see. What do I have to see on Twitter? Somebody promoting some shit?
Hey, listen, speaking of that, at Mr. Chris Morrow.
Mr. Chris Morrow.
Make sure you hit him up. Let him know.
Might be a pretty dead account. I don't think I've posted anything in. I'm done. So,
keep him alive. Yeah. But I want to let you know, seriously, thanks for sitting with me
Absolutely.
today. More importantly, I want to let you know that you are in my prayers.
Well, yeah,
I hope you feel better.
Thank you.
And, if there's anything you need, or if you need me to tell my mother make some baked ziti for you.
No pasta. I'm not allowed to have any gluten.
All right,
That's part of my diet.
I'm not trying to hurt you here.
Yeah, thank you.
Gluten-free, ma.
Yep.
But listen, Internets, Mr. Chris Morrow.
Cheer.
Internets, if you enjoyed that episode, I want you to reach out to me. Email me. Tweet me, okay? Email thepremiumpeteshow@gmail.com. At Twitter, @PremiumPete. @Premium Pete Show, on Instagram @Premium Pete, @Premium Pete Show also. Let me know what you like. Let me know what you didn't like. And also to all my small businesses or big businesses, no matter how small or big you are, you want to advertise with the Premium Pete Show, get at me. thepremiumpeteshow@gmail.com, and we'll figure something out, okay? Now make sure you subscribe, rate, and tell a friend to tell a friend. And I'll see you next episode. Cheer.